This week's political storm over the collapse of the so-called China spy case tells us far more about Westminster than it does about espionage. At its heart is not simply a failed prosecution, but a failure of political courage, of institutional clarity, and of trust between government, prosecutors and the security services. The facts are extraordinary. Two men, Christopher Cash, a former Tory parliamentary researcher, and Christopher Berry, a teacher with links in China, were charged under the Official Secrets Act for allegedly passing information to Chinese intelligence. The Crown Prosecution Service dropped the case in September after the government refused to sign off a witness statement declaring China a threat to national security. And that refusal is where the scandal lies. Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions, said the CPS had spent many months asking ministers for this evidence. It never came. And without it, the prosecution couldn't proceed. And so, the most serious espionage case involving alleged Chinese infiltration of Parliament collapsed, not because of innocence proven, but because of government silence. Sir Keir Starmer, on a trade trip to India, was quick to deflect the blame. He argued that the alleged offences took place under the previous Conservative government and that, as a matter of law, prosecutors could only act on the official position that applied at the time of the alleged crime. That position, he said, was set by the Tories, who had not officially designated China a national security threat. It's a clever line, legally defensible perhaps, but politically evasive. And the current Director of Public Prosecutions, himself independent of government, insists that it was this Labour government that refused to provide the required witness statement. Tory ministers, including Kemi Badenoch and Kevin Hollinrake, now accuse Starmer of spiking the prosecution to protect his diplomatic agenda with Beijing. Badenoch even claimed with predictable flourish that Labour deliberately collapsed the trial because the Prime Minister wanted to suck up to Beijing. Lib Dems joined the attack, saying it was shocking that a national security case was dropped because ministers refused to confirm China is a menace. The charge is not treason but timidity. That Starmer, keen to rekindle trade and investment, is downplaying the authoritarianism of the world's second largest economy. There are also institutional questions. The case relied on the 1911 Official Secrets Act, which defines an enemy in antiquated terms. A recent Court of Appeal ruling in a separate case against Bulgarian spies expanded that definition, requiring prosecutors to show a threat to national security rather than a formal state of war. Some lawyers argue that this would have made the case easier, not harder to prove. Others insist the CPS never had enough evidence in the first place. But the damage now extends beyond the courtroom. Charles Parton, a veteran China diplomat who was due to testify, said the collapse signals to Beijing that Britain can be bullied. He called it a missed opportunity to show resolve against a country that he describes as hostile, intent and capable. 3 words any intelligence analyst would recognise as defining a threat. MI5, it's understood, had wanted the case to proceed, to expose China's espionage network operating in Britain. Instead, Beijing now declares vindication, calling the allegations malicious slander and denouncing Britain's self-staged political farce. And there's the rub. Whether out of economic caution or diplomatic calculation, London has allowed itself to appear weak. Britain's China policy is riddled with contradictions, calling Beijing a sophisticated and persistent challenge, but refusing to call it an enemy, its strategic ambiguity stretched to absurdity. The collapse of this case is therefore not just a legal failure, but a moral one. It shows a government unwilling to speak plain truths about power, a bureaucracy paralysed by a fear of consequence, and a justice system trapped between outdated laws and political cowardice. When Starmer tells us that all the focus should be on the Tories, he may be right in a narrow sense, but leadership is not about passing the parcel of blame. It's about clarity, conviction, and the defence of national sovereignty. On those counts, this episode has left the British state looking hesitant and the Chinese state looking emboldened. In the end, no jury has ruled, no verdict has been rendered, but one truth has become deeply self-evident. When governments refuse to define their adversaries, they end up undermining themselves. This week, The courtroom was silent, but the echo of that failure resounds across Westminster, a warning that strategic caution can easily slide into political submission. And while I think we should be cautious about other countries, we should equally be using what leverage and what opportunities we've got in terms of trade and the arts and our joint connections to secure a better relationship. A better relationship is something that we need more than we need a lot of saber rattling and decisions in court. But we shouldn't be turning tail and U-turning to this extent. It exhibits hesitancy, weakness, stupidity.